Let's call this meeting of the Master Plan Working Group to order. It is February 3rd, 2025, and we'll begin with a roll call. Bob Carroll.
Yeah, Bob's here.
Victoria Duckworth.
Here.
Lindsay Fox.
Here.
I will, knowing that Anne Marie is, I won't count her as present just yet. Deborah George. Brian Houle.
Here.
Brian is here. And I will circle back to Deborah George in a moment. She seems to be signing in. Chantel Kimball. Don't see her. Essek Petrie.
Here.
David Robbins is here. Sue Robbins.
Here.
Colleen Roy. Circle back to Colleen in a moment. Rashawn Otangi. All right, Deborah George.
Here.
And Colleen Roy. I see Colleen. I didn't hear her.
Yeah, that took a second to connect. I'm in now, though.
Oh, excellent. Oh, outstanding. We have 9 out of 12 members currently attending the meeting, and one more. Anne Marie will be joining us when she can break away from her other meeting. So let me see. We have an agenda. Action items, approve meeting minutes. I just looked on the website. Looks like we have 2 meeting minutes available, November 6th and December 2nd, to review and approve. Just as a reminder, November 6th, we didn't have a quorum, so the meeting minutes reflect an informational discussion, but no actions were taken at that meeting. So if anybody's had a chance to review either of these minutes and would care to make a motion regarding approving them.
I move that we approve the minutes from November 6th and December 2nd as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any additions or corrections? If not, we'll take a vote by roll call. Bob Carroll.
Bob Carroll's aye.
Victoria Duckworth.
Aye.
Lindsay Fox.
Aye.
Deborah George.
I'll abstain just because I was at neither of those meetings.
Okay. Brian Houle.
Aye.
Essek Petrie.
Aye.
David Robbins votes aye. Sue Robbins.
Aye.
Colleen Roy. Colleen?
Didn't hear that?
Huh.
Oh, this is going to be
It
fun.
took a moment for your sound to turn on.
Okay.
All right. So declare the motion carried by a vote of 8 in favor, none against, and 1 abstention. And takes care of our action item agenda. Fiona, am I correct that we don't yet have meeting minutes for January 6th?
Yes, that's correct. I tried, failed. I'll have them next time.
Okay, well then we can move on to into our discussion items. Just as a note from the CMRPC staff perspective, Elena has moved on. I gather if I remember it correctly, she took a job elsewhere. And so now from CMRPC, we have Sarah and Dominique heading up the project. And it's not the first time I've been in a project where CMRPC staff changes have taken place, but I think we have every reason to expect good continuity here. So we have on the agenda discussion items of 2 draft chapter reviews: open space and recreation and natural and cultural resources. So Sarah, do you want to kick this off? I don't know which one you want to go over first, but that's up to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll introduce/reintroduce for some of you Dominique, who will be helping us over the finish line here.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And thanks, Dave. I just wanted to say hello. I'm Dominique Dutremble. I'm the Director of Community Planning. It's nice to see you all again. Thanks for bearing with us as Elena has moved on to new pastures in Boston. But, I know you've done tremendous work so far, and it continues to be in great hands with Sarah. I will be stepping back into the master plan to make sure that we have the manpower and, again, continuity. But you're almost there, and I'm really excited to be engaged in a greater capacity in this final stage, which is, I think the most exciting part for me. So we're both here for you as well as the entire team, and I'm just looking forward to getting back up to speed. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Great. So tonight is our last two chapters for a second review. So Sam is here on behalf of the writers of Natural Cultural Resources and Open Space and Recreation to go over the changes or major changes to the chapter since the last time it was reviewed. Of course, the long list of comments from all of you and our suggestions or how the comments were integrated is still live on that matrix. But Sam will be going over some big picture changes to the chapter. Mm-hmm. A question for the committee, since we are looking to wrap up changes to the chapter from the committee, wondering who, if any of you, are still looking to comment on any of the chapters. Of course, we'll give you some time to look over the two chapters that we're representing tonight, but we're looking to move some of the chapters into final design. And it's easiest to do it if there's not too many changes. Of course, we'll go through other draft periods, but I'm curious if there's any committee members that are still looking to make changes and to what specific chapters.
Anybody? Just speaking for myself, having just reviewed the latest drafts, other than things like typos and very minor issues of terminology, details of certain numbers, I really, at this point, I don't know of any substantive comments that I have that I expect to make, subject to review of the of the final drafts as they come through. But at this point, what I'm left with when I read these is just noticing little nits here and there, which there's no reason to discuss those tonight, but it's some sort of a final proofreading pass that we'll want to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does anybody else have anything? Anne Marie.
Yeah, I'm here live, first of all. And then secondly, I'm just wondering where we landed or where you folks landed with including verbiage relative to the MBTA zoning, and if that specificity ended up in the document. And I apologize if I haven't seen it to review it. And I understand that's probably not tonight's, but if you're just looking for overall.
Yeah, great question. We did decide to include information that was more long-term plan that was suitable for the scope of the master plan. So it has less of those minute details that Gabe presented that was more informational for the committee and more just overview of the direction that the state is going in.
All right. Anything else from the committee, to address Sarah's question? Basically, you're looking for any indication that any of us have any fairly substantive comments that we still expect to make. And hearing none.
Great. Awesome. So we will go right ahead with final design for those chapters that we've already done a second review of. We'll give you a little bit more time with these two chapters tonight. Looking to kind of close these for this round of reviews on February 18th. So that'll be 2 weeks plus the holiday on Monday. And that'll be super helpful to us to get this wrapped up. Awesome. So I think with that, I can turn it over to Sam and he'll walk you through those two chapters.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, it actually doesn't look like I'm allowed to share right now. I think I need to be given permission by the host.
All right, I'll
You
work
want
on
to
that
fix
right
that?
now.
Okay. 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 So you guys can just see the natural and cultural resources chapter here, yeah? Okay. Probably the biggest change between the two chapters was looking at both of them and sort of figuring out like if there's any sort of mismatch or ways that they could be better organized without really getting rid of any of the information, just moving it around so that it flows better. So in our comments matrix, I don't know, if I switch tabs, can you guys see the new tab that I'm on?
Yep.
Okay. In the comments matrix, I wrote a bunch of stuff, like explained everything that I kind of moved around between the goals, action items, and objectives. The biggest thing was moving the agriculture stuff into the open space and recreation chapter. And then moving the stuff from goal 2 in the open space and recreation stuff, mostly pertaining to water-based recreation, water quality. I just moved the water quality stuff into the natural resources discussion in the natural resources chapter. And I moved the stuff about water-based recreation into the recreation section of the first goal of the open space chapter. And then to make up for that imbalance, because now there would only be one goal in the open space section, that's why I moved over the agriculture stuff. So those are some of the bigger changes that I made, just to make sure that everything kind of flows well and that there's not a lot of like repeating information or information that seems out of place. The second thing that we changed, or the second major change, was mentioning that the connection between municipal building maintenance and natural resources. Well, it was mentioned that the connection there was unclear. So we just clarified that it's just saying that the time and resources for open space and natural resource management is just competing with their municipal priorities. So we just kind of changed the wording of that. Another one on row 9 of the comments, we were asked to incorporate HMP findings, hazard mitigation plan findings, into the NCR chapter. So we made that a new objective. Hazard. I think if I just type hazard areas, you can find it. Yeah, so we just made a new objective to secure funding to protect historic resources from vulnerabilities related to natural hazards. And then another big change for this one was that we were asked to check with the DPW on regional approaches to MS4 compliance. So we reached out to them and we found that regionalism with regards to MS4 isn't really viable since each town has its own unique requirements. So we just included details about that and some other options under action item 1.1.2. We were also asked to explain more about like right to farm. At least, I mean, this doesn't necessarily have to be in the plan, but just someone asked for more information on that and why it's being suggested. And so I guess I can just explain it here. As far as I know, right to farm can be pretty flexible in how it's implemented to match the growth pattern of a community. And like I think the problem is that it's recognized as a concern in our region that farms are being driven out and nuisance complaints arising as subdivisions are being built near historically agricultural areas are exacerbating the issue. And so even though Grafton is like pretty suburbanized, the community does still highly value the farms that remain. And so this would just add another layer of protection. So we can discuss that after we go over this chapter, I guess, if you still or having second thoughts about including that one. In row 32 of the comments matrix, it was mentioned that there wasn't anything about Nelson Park included, so I just added a blurb of that under the historical assets inventory under goal 2. And then another big thing I did with this chapter was, where is it? Here. I had that whole discussion with the Hassanamisco band, and I sort of went over like the things that I added to the chapter with them, and they sort of came back to me, and we had a sort of back and forth about different things that could be added to improve the discussion. And we came out with, like, instead of just having an action item pertaining to them, turning it into a whole objective with corresponding action items. So these are the action items here. And that's it for like the major changes for the NCR chapter. So I guess we can do like a comment period now for this chapter and then go into open space.
Yep. Any comments and questions about this from anybody?
Quick question. I've never heard it referred to as a Hassanamiscut band. Is that what they're?
They are. I mean, they were made a state recognized tribe, but technically they're not a tribe. Aside from that designation, but it's still fine to call them a tribe. They still go by that terminology from time to time.
I'm fine with whatever is appropriate. I just had never heard that terminology before, so that was all.
Deborah?
Yeah.
I just wondered if you could expand on making sure that people are not prosecuted for the hunting. Could you just expand on that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a recurring problem that the different members of different tribal communities in Massachusetts they technically were granted access to hunt, like, for example, out of season or on like public properties where they technically, other people would not be permitted to like fish, for example. So they were granted protection to do this back in, like, I think it was like the 1970s by like a resolution to an executive order that I have, like, I have a copy of it that I can send you guys, but we're including it in the appendix. And so they just try to get the word out about like the fact that they have like different protections granted to them than are afforded like other people to have more access to lands. And so this action item just sort of expands upon that a bit and talks about how police in the community should be made more aware of that, and like what like the protocol is for dealing with potential complaints.
I guess my main thing would be if they still need to adhere to hunting rules where you can't hunt on trails. Is it Sundays around in this area? Just things like that.
Is it what?
I'm just curious if they would still have to adhere to things like no hunting on Sundays.
I think they are like technically like granted full protection to not have specific off days where they can't hunt, or they have access to significantly more land to hunt. I think like they're like technically like it's just like they have to use their own discretion to not even hunt or fish on private lands, because the actual verbiage of that resolution was very broad sweeping. So it's really just like up to the discretion of the tribe to be responsible about the freedoms that they're granted. And then if they are ever like detained or anything or ticketed by police, they have like their own process for getting that ticket resolved. It's pretty interesting. Like they actually have a lot of access to land that other people are not afforded.
It just
Anything
seems
else?
like, I was just gonna finish with, it just seems like a potential conflict, if you will, with all the other people we've identified who want to use public lands within the town of Grafton.
Yeah.
Anything else, Deborah? Fiona?
No.
Thanks, Sam, for bringing that to our attention. I was unaware. I think this is just more of a comment about maybe just like an in-text citation or like a footnote,
Yeah, let's go to that here.
just so we can, the reader can see that reference right away.
Yeah, we're gonna have it as an appendix thing, so I just have C appendix X in here.
Okay, perfect.
Anything else, Fiona?
Not at the moment. Actually, this isn't pertaining to that piece of legislation specifically, but is there references in this? And I'm sorry because I didn't get to look at it right before the meeting, but to like all trails and those types of public platforms, Sam?
References to all trails.
Or like something like that, like a public map trails app rather. One thing
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say on the back end, but maybe before you finalize this, just if there is references to those things, if we could just redact it and just reference, direct people to either the Conservation Commission's website or the Grafton Land Trust website regarding trails, because I'm learning that all trails and such are not always updated with some of the private property limitations. And I think we just want to be cognizant of making sure people don't wander onto somebody's, private property and then might run into a safety issue or something. So that was more general, but something that I wanted to bring up because I caught it the other day. So thank you.
I'm pretty sure we don't reference all trails, but that would be in the.
I don't think so, but.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's all I got. Thanks.
Yeah. I've heard that problem in the past, like in some towns, they have like trails that they don't really want people using at all because it's like in very ecologically sensitive areas, and it doesn't really discriminate at all in terms of, because they don't really do any outreach to communities about like what they actually want shown on that app. So
right. They never double check, and then people are like, "Oh, I can go here." The app says I can. It's like, no, don't go there.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay, Sue.
I just wanted to just repeat what Fiona said, that I think this should be referenced. And I wanted to ask Sam if this is considered in the resolution or whatever it's called. Are they considered sovereign?
I think technically not, but I wouldn't tell them that because it's like kind of a touchy subject.
Because it sounds kind of like it is a little bit.
Yeah.
Sovereignty, the way you described it anyway. I'd have to read it over, but but I think it should be referenced because people are going to have a lot of questions.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Bob?
Yeah, I was kind of gonna jump on this thread a little bit for 2.3.4. The language in there that stuck out to me was for the purpose of sustenance of their families.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the thread here. And I could just see this whole thing being a can of worms, because now you're going to have potentially conflicts and opening this up where I don't know if this belongs in a master plan, right? And what we want here.
They have I think there's been a lot of litigation over the years to sort of clarify what this means. I didn't get too far into the actual court proceedings, but it seems like this is also as long as they can, I think it's pretty, the scope of what this entails. I think it's literally just as long as, they say well, I'm doing this for the sustenance of my families, that they have access to the land. Like they don't actually have to really back this up by anything. So, yeah.
Right, and I wasn't looking to litigate this here and now, but
Mhm.
again, my opinion would be that I think we want to tread lightly on this, and again, I don't know if this belongs in a master plan, right? You know, that's I don't know what that leads to our vision. This just seems that it's potentially contentious and would stir up a lot of other issues that may detract from the main purpose of this, which is the vision, right, and where we want to go. I don't know how others feel. Again, I'm not looking to litigate or have a dog in the hunt or have an opinion one side or the other. Just that I don't think necessarily belongs in here.
I don't know. What do other people think?
Fiona.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused as to why we wouldn't include it. I mean, is that the sentence there, the sustenance of their families? I mean, is that the problem? Like the language? I mean, I think
this is the language in the resolution too, by the way.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought. Yeah, I guess I'm not. I get Bob's point. Kind of, but I also don't think we should remove it. I mean, we definitely want to make sure that they have access to where they need to be. Yeah, I don't know. I think we should keep it.
It just almost feels a little bit outside of the purview of a master plan, though. If this is something that has state or federal legislation that's handled in much higher documentation than within the town master plan.
But yeah, I mean, if maybe it's a rewording to situation where we just talk about strengthening our partnerships and locally assisting. I'm not going to be able to come up with the words on the spot, but yeah, I don't know. The Hasemasko band have kind of voiced that they want to be involved in this process, and they've had conversations with Sam, and I don't know. I just feel like redacting it could also be a problem. I think it might just be maybe rewording. It is federal, but
yeah,
there's a lot. I mean, Grafton is unique in that we share the town with them, and they should be part of the process.
Yeah, I think it's probably this particular point is probably something that very few people are aware of. So, in the sense of sort of respecting the Hasemasko of the heritage there and the relationship they've had with the town. At least conceptually, as part of the master plan, it's this whole section is sort of oriented around increasing awareness and increasing our ability to to integrate Grafton with the Triber band here. Anyway, I don't want to. Let me go. The next hand up is Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. This is a very interesting topic. I guess I agree that this should stay in, especially is this an ongoing issue or is it like the most common complaint?
Yeah, I mean, it is like this is a topic that's come up in almost like every conversation that I've had with the Indigenous community, that like this is something that like they deeply care about. Protecting their ability to have access to these lands. And I think it would be a pretty prickly subject. I mean, it would be a pretty risky thing to take out at this point in time. because they're very vocal about wanting this to be made clear to people. So
Great. I definitely think, then yeah, it should certainly stay in here for sure. And I also wanted to say that I think it's a great idea to discuss the right to farm and supporting agriculture in the town. I think that should also stay. Thank you.
Anne Marie.
Yeah, for me, this is just kind of another level of specificity that I've kind of brought up in other chapters that I don't think aligns with coming up with just a broader overall vision, as opposed to just this level of specificity. And I think to Fiona's point, perhaps just a rewording of this might be in order. Again, for me, it's just more the level of specificity that we will be looking at, going forward. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions about this? Anything else on the natural and cultural resources chapter here?
Well, Dave, I think we might need to decide. I don't know if we need to put, if the working group wants to take a vote on how to proceed, if they want to do a rewording or not. I think I just want to try and give Sam some direction so he knows what he's needs to do.
Sue?
I think this should all stay in. I understand your remark, Anne Marie, about specificity, but this is this is a big cultural part of Grafton. And if this is something they want the Grafton residents and people in town know more about them, I think this is a great way to do it. And I just think it should stay in. It's a big part of our historical and cultural aspects of our town.
Anne Marie.
Let me just unmute. I'm just looking at, is this based on, I know you reached out to the group, which is fabulous, but is there anything in the previous master plan relative to this? I don't see it under resources. I'm just trying to find if there's just a kind of a place to start or a precedent that was set, or is this just kind of, a new direction that we're looking at, which is fine. I'm just curious.
Yeah, to the best of my recollection, the previous master plan, now some 25 years old, paid little, if any, attention to the indigenous people of Grafton.
Which is a problem.
Which is the problem.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll take that as a no.
No.
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
So.
Colleen.
I'm in agreement that it should be kept the same, that the whole action item is to ensure Native people are not to be persecuted, and it goes into, just a minor example. So I can make a motion if we want to take a vote for Fiona. I move that we keep the language as is.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Discussion. Bob?
Yeah, I just didn't want my remarks mischaracterized. I'm for having this in here, but I think I'm more aligned with Anne Marie that I would suggest it be less prescriptive, and we're supportive and we do want to ensure the Native peoples are not prosecuted, but if we get into some of the appendices, if and when they get added, and the claims, that seems like a slippery slope to me. And I've forgotten who brought up the point earlier, but make sure people understand what we're saying here was essentially Native peoples. If I'm reading it, I'm not a lawyer, but at a high level, they can pretty much hunt and fish on any of these lands anytime they want to, in season, out of season, Sundays, right? Essentially with firearms. So want to make sure people understand that.
Anything else, Bob? Essex?
Yeah, sorry, I was kind of going in the same direction. It's a little confusing to me as far as what this is saying. That the way it's written here is the lands, and as far as which lands, and maybe again similarly, maybe I'm just not reading it correctly, but it says access to all lands in the Commonwealth to hunt and fish for the sustenance of the families. To me, that reads as that goes across private, public, state, federal, any property whatsoever. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, I mean, to basically what I've been looking at, yeah, it is surprising. I mean, it sounds absurd, but that is what I have read.
So we should just be sure of that language, because that to me touches off a very potentially hot topic. If we're saying that they're capable to hunt on private lands that aren't theirs, and we're not sure of it, we should just make sure that we're very, very clear as far as what we're saying.
Okay, so if I get in touch with the state level agency on Indian affairs, and I come to and they confirm that this is the case, is it still a touchy subject that we don't want to include, or should I just go ahead with it at that point?
Well, it sounds like that's what the vote is going for right now. So that's a great question, Sam. I just I just think a lot of people will be surprised to come across. I personally was, and again, I don't have an issue with it or whatnot, but I did not realize that was the case, and I'm guessing a lot of other people might not as well.
Okay.
So we should just be prepared to respond to those comments.
Okay, Lindsay?
Yeah, so I feel like, if this is the case, I think everyone should be aware of it, either way. I think that, I think it's reasonable to just kind of go in and look at the wording to, maybe reword it a little bit. But yeah, I think, maybe for the specificity, maybe that can go in more appendix items or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know, it warrants, certainly looking into a little bit more, but, I do think it belongs if that's really, the case. Everyone should know, be aware at least.
Thank you. Colleen?
Yeah, Lindsay just took the words out of my mouth. I think that the fact that so many people on this call were unaware of this, and not to say that I knew either before I read this, it's important for the vision of Grafton going forward to ensure that everybody is aware of this. So I think it's important to keep it in, and I don't mind double checking it, but again, the language is not offensive at all to me, and this isn't a policy. We are not instituting anything. We're just making sure people are aware.
Exactly.
Okay.
David? Okay. I just wanted to remark that as far as I know, as long as I've lived in Grafton, this has never been abused. I don't think anybody has ever complained about somebody hunting on their private property at any time of the year. Not that I'm aware of. I've never heard anybody complaining about it in this town, so I don't think it's being abused at all.
Right, because I think it is, I think the reason it hasn't gotten to a point where they felt like a significant, and I mean, I'm going to contact the state about this at this point to clarify, since it's been such a hot topic here, but it's just not really ever gotten to that point where it's become less of a, where it's become more concrete in law, just because they've been good about using discretion. They understand that if they go onto private property, there's a risk that they're just going to get shot. And it's that it's just because it's so dangerous to do that, they just tend to avoid even running into that conflict, or just more because the private property owner is not going to be like, oh, well, they're a Native American, and so I understand that they are free to do this. It's
That would be that's how I doubt very much if that would be the reaction. But
Right.
maybe, can I just suggest then, since he has to check with the state to clarify all this, can we just hold off the vote until the next meeting so we get better clarification on this? I want to keep the cultural and historical part of this in, but if that's one sentence is bothering everybody, then we can just change it. But I would like to see if we could hold off the vote if anyone's willing to do that.
This is Essex. That makes sense to me as well. I think making the vote when we have all the information makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Brian.
Yeah, in terms of what everyone's talked about, I agree with Sue. If we're getting into the weeds here, the idea of having it in an appendix, not taking it out, but just having it in an appendix would seem to me would make more sense than to incorporate it into the actual verbiage here. That's all.
Okay. Anything else, Brian? Bob?
I'm in agreement with Sue to hold the vote off. I guess, again, not to get too hung up on this, but if I read the last sentence, right, we're saying we're to notify the Grafton police as to the rights of these people. I don't know if this committee in their charge should be notifying Grafton police when we really don't understand, the law here, right?
That was intended more as to reach out to them about it, make sure that it's see where they're at with it, see if they've in terms of their own training, if they have had to deal with a case like this before. I think it wasn't really intended as we're going to, because of our limited knowledge, go ahead and tell you that you have to abide by this rule. It was more of an encouragement to do their own investigation into it. But again, I'll come back to you with more information from the state on this.
Yeah, I think to me the gist of this whole action item is the idea of making the citizens of Grafton aware of this right that the indigenous people have, and there's when you drill down on that, then being aware of it has means a number of different things to different people. It means that the people who might be involved in fielding complaints about it need to be aware. But rather than going back a little bit to Anne Marie's concern about specificity, I think it's certainly not overly specific to say that here's something that that's important to the indigenous people that most of us weren't aware of and should be. How detailed we get in the master plan beyond that, what specific possible actions need to be taken in response to the idea of awareness is something that there's a little bit of uncertainty, as we've discussed. And so if everybody's kind of comfortable with the topic remaining here, awareness of this particular indigenous right, the details of exactly how we word it in the master plan are at least somewhat subject to getting more information that we don't currently have. Bob, your hand is still up.
Yeah, I would support that, David. The last 3 or 4 sentences to me seem very prescriptive, and we have comments about lack of specific training for officers. I don't know do we know that they've not had training?
This has been a thing that they've discussed about other towns, is that the local police
So we don't know
in
in Grafton if this is the case, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Here, if they are not already aware of this, there's prescriptive claims here because these are action items and they're all prescriptive. But I think the point of this is really just to say if this is the case that this is accurate, that they do have access to these lands, and if it's the case that they're telling the truth about the fact that they've been persecuted for, despite being granted access to these lands, then the solution to that problem is then to inform police officers that they do have access to these lands and not have them persecuted for it. That's why it's in here. Like, that is the only prescriptive claim that you can really get out of this information. So that's why I have it there. But
Yeah, I guess I'll just leave this. We'll see what everyone comes back with next time and maybe have a vote.
Okay, so
I just want to say that I would like to keep this in. I don't want it to be put in an appendix because that's really dismissing an important group of people in our town by just setting them aside and saying, well, we noticed you, but I think this is important to keep it in here. And if you want to change 1 or 2 sentences, then do that. But putting it in an appendix, I think, is really dismissing a big part of our culture in Grafton.
Totally agree, Sue.
yeah. We do have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? I mean, I kind of get the sense that the consensus we're reaching here is, we want to acknowledge this in some way, we want to kind of keep it in here, but the details of just how we write this, we want to get more information and circle back on that.
Yes.
If that's where we're at, do we need to actually vote on the motion?
I'll withdraw my second if Colleen withdraws.
I'll withdraw my motion. It was to help give us direction. I think
Yep.
Sam, you have direction now, correct?
Yep.
Yep. I think we probably beat this to death for tonight, but I think, Sam, you have a pretty good sense of where we're going with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing is, I tried to reach out to the specific state agency on the Indian Affairs in the past, and they actually did not get back to me. So there is the risk of that happening again, where I try to reach out to them for more information and they just don't contact me back. And if that's the case, I mean, we can get rid of this action item if it's a concern.
Well, I think that we could probably go down different additional avenues than just that, because I agree it's important, but we should just make sure that we're 100% confident with what we include. That's all. I mean, if we're in contact with the tribe members, maybe they would be able to provide us with some contact information that might help as well.
Sure. Okay.
Again, I think it's important to keep the point here, that is the awareness of a concern that the Indigenous people have, an issue that they may never have encountered a problem with this here in Grafton, but it is something that the Indigenous folks have encountered from time to time across the Commonwealth, and so for Grafton to be aware of that as part of our emphasis here in this section is to be cognizant of our Indigenous, the Indigenous inhabitants of Grafton and their history and their needs to be a part of the community. Colleen.
Yeah, and I like leaving in that the Grafton police should be made aware, and in all likelihood they are aware, and hopefully they remain aware, but like so many of us tonight, we're unaware. So I think keeping something in here for people to, oh my gosh, did you know that? I think it's hugely important.
Yeah, I think that's the point of this paragraph, is for the community as a whole to be aware of this particular point.
So have we beat up Sam enough?
Well, okay, I will add this one thing, because when I was looking into this, I did find this webinar from their website that actually was like the executive director on the I forget what it's called, the Indian Affairs Agency. It's the Commission on Indian Affairs. The executive director of the Commission on Indian Affairs had this webinar where he was sort of going over these topics. And the only reason I'm not saying it as it's like a definitive source is just because like the actual contents of the webinar were kind of all over the place. But like what I did get out of it was like what I have included here, along with the appendix item. Like, I think there's enough information from that webinar that maybe we could come to the conclusion after other people look at it, that like it's definitive enough that this is okay to include. But yeah, I'm just gonna share that in the. Is there a chat function in this Zoom?
It's the Q&A.
Okay, it doesn't look like I can add to that, but I can send you guys the link to the webinar afterwards. He went over this topic, but it was kind of hard to. It's hard, just like the way that they worded things in the webinar was a little vague, so that's kind of why this ended up being so vague as well. So yeah, but yeah, I'll try to get in touch with them and get more like concrete answers about it.
All right, so let's move on from this topic.
Sure.
I gather that pretty much we're expecting to circle back on this one paragraph at our next meeting.
So the next thing that we are covering is the open space and recreation chapter. One of the big points from this one was that, let's see here. There was the topic of the Pepperoni Express location and the swamp behind it as an ecotourism location. I sort of went back and edited that to be just an action item about adding more amenities along Worcester Street in general. Because it was cited through other like survey results that there was a lack of green space, and that it had like sort of a gasoline alley feel along Worcester Street, that maybe could be remedied with like maybe new green infrastructure or like a community garden somewhere along there to sort of, you know, give it more of a naturey feel. What am I typing in here? Worcester Street. So that's right here. Another big one was the discussion of the Whitney Park project. I just added a bit about finishing implementing the items from the, I think it was a past assessment completed by CMRPC. Yeah. Just like Whitney Park redesign improvements. And then another big one was the, where is it? So there was a point about having potentially too many recommendations about plans in here. I think part of that was because there was a discussion of the different capital improvement plans and like programmatic plans for the next few years for the recreation department. But those were already completed this year. So I just made it more clear that those were already like done and that the recommendation was just to like, they're each like page long. So there was just recommendations about keeping those updated as time goes on. Fiona, you had your hand up?
Yeah, Sam, sorry not to, I just want to backtrack to the Worcester Street corridor for a second there.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
So, I would be, I would just express concern. Well, okay. How about, I wonder if this might make more sense to incorporate in the zoning, like requirements for like greening and open space, because that is a, you know, it's kind of a key commercial corridor in town, and we do want to, we obviously want to make it look beautiful, but I also want to make sure that we are, you know, assisting businesses as well. I think we can achieve both. I think my concern was maybe like realistic greening elements along there so that it works, like, as like, a small business wants to come in and they might be spending, thousands upon thousands of dollars on a specific type of like arborvitae. Like, let's not like overdo it, I guess, in a way, because we already have limited commercial space in town. But it's just food for thought for the working group. That was just the first thing that came to my mind. Maybe just a little bit more requirements on folks, on private landowners, but still allow them to kind of, I don't know if I would necessarily be in favor of, changing like the designation per se, because as I mentioned, commercial areas is limited in town. So just something to think about.
Do you mean changing the designation, like changing the zoning itself?
Yeah, I think there was at one point it was mentioned, there was like a comment received, like turn, and I could be getting it wrong, so I'm sorry if I misheard, but like changing it to more like a nature kind of preserving kind of like feel, like maybe having it like that some areas revert back to the kind of natural, like swampy green space that it was before. I guess I would just be a little bit concerned because, we have limited commercial area. So I think if there is buildable portions of those lots, we want to see, business there. But we also want to see businesses contribute to the beautification of Grafton in that corridor. So just kind of something to think about.
Okay. I see other hands raised.
Elaine?
So the action item is introduce open space and amenities along Worcester Street. Worcester Street does have open space amenities currently on there. We have Ekblaw Landing, which is a canoe launching, and it has trails and open space. So Worcester Street has achieved that already. So I don't know if that needs to be worded slightly differently and or referenced, maybe maintaining that or I don't know. But to Fiona's point, we don't want to lose the ability to economically develop those spaces when we have, some of those resources already on Worcester Street.
Yeah, I mean, that could just be a matter of saying introduce additional open space, but also, I mean, to your point about going over the top and adding too much that it breaks up the commercial corridor, I think things like rain gardens or like bioswales or street trees along that corridor, I think there's amenities that you can add without like limiting the commercial growth that can still take place there. I think like with denser development, you can definitely have that accompanied by street trees and more green infrastructure.
Could you word that in the action item instead of open space? Because I think people hear
Sure.
open space and they think something different.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Brian?
I would just take out the address because in past examples we didn't want to put the landowner into the plan where they would be targeted in any way that they might object to it. So I think if you want to leave it in, which I'm okay with in terms of having green space and so forth, and that is behind there some great areas that could be attract people to town and actually help businesses if it's done the right way, with a boardwalk or whatever. But I would say take out the 92 Worcester Street.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You're kind of putting the owner in a bad position, I think, if you leave it in there.
Yeah, okay.
That's about it. I'm all for the green stuff, though. That's great.
Okay, Fiona?
Yeah, just for Sam, just to provide some more helpful context. So, our VMU zoning is a good example of like districts where we kind of go above, a little beyond, and have specific requirements around like vegetation, like greenery and that type of design. So maybe it's a matter of incorporating some of those requirements that we already ask for in VMU districts and merging it with commercial business and neighborhood business districts in a way that makes sense. I don't want to I don't want to like rewrite the action item. This is for the working group to decide, but my point being is that we do this in town already. And
Sure.
maybe just that's kind of we can, because we can achieve both that way, right? Like new development can come in and they'll still be required through, local bylaws to provide what we're asking them to. So thanks.
I think just to build on that point slightly, in our economic development chapter, and I think probably our land use chapter, to some extent, to the extent that it's relevant to this particular area, even the residential part, I think we are kind of looking in a direction of this Worcester Street area. Specifically, this would be Worcester Street between Carroll Road and Snow Road, which is kind of a concentrated business. It's sort of the business center of Grafton, and on both to the east and west of it, there is significant residential development. In fact, really on all four surrounding it, there's significant residential development. So if you kind of look at it as a whole area, this could look like something like a village center. Not so much a small scale village center, because this is really our single largest business center, but you could look at taking this area and giving it some of planning to evolve it to some of the characteristics of a village mixed use. Not entirely, but along some of the same lines, like Fiona mentioned. In village mixed use, it's basically more of a form-based zoning code, but we have a lot of design guidelines talking about various forms of amenity spaces adjacent to the commercial spaces. And so, while I'm not going to try to be real specific here, but I think some of those concepts, when we look at this as a whole, this is one of the sort of village centers that we want to be able to look at, from both the commercial development, to some extent residential development, and open space like amenities. And so right here in this chapter, I think it's entirely appropriate to talk about adding some amenities, open space type of things, finding ways to fit that in to the commercial existing and hopefully future commercial development we see here.
How do you feel about the possibility of some kind of waterfront walk along, like by Cancun? Is there space there for that? Because I thought just thinking about that as a potential option.
And I'm not quite sure. I think that as a general idea, looking at some amenities around Lake Ripple where there might be opportunities, it's something to think about. Without a closer look at it, I can't really say. Brian, you had your hand up?
Yes, to answer the question, I've been on both sides of the pond there, so I know that pretty well. And there's very little, depending on what the town wanted to do, and how they wanted to design it. You've got the highway right there with absolutely no way to get there except to extend it, make a sidewalk on the inside of the rails. And behind Cancun's is, again, there's not much there other than water. But conceivably, with the right construction, you certainly could put in a nice walk path through there. There is some residential, on the opposite side of the river. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. You can't touch 140, right? Because it's state route.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has there been this? Yeah.
Anne Marie?
Hi, for what it's worth, when I was running for select board a couple of years ago, I had a number of people ask me about exactly this, trying to do something around Lake Ripple. So again, for what it's worth, this isn't the first time I've heard it. So it's interesting that it's in here, and folks have brought that up to me. Not, it's a small sample size, but just the same, it was asked of me.
Anything else on this particular topic? What else?
Okay. So, I mean, so to close that one out, we're okay with something like this, but maybe specifying more that we'd like to do something similar to that. What was the name of the other district? The VMU district?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So next topic. In row 22, was asking, like row 22 of the comments matrix, brought up the discussion of conservation restrictions, and asked for more information to be provided in here about that. So I just added a section sort of discussing conservation restrictions and their merits. Row 24, there was a discussion about like a feasibility study that had been done for an emergency pathway from the North Street Elementary School. And Fiona and I talked about this, and she wanted it to be noted that making new trails like that for emergency services can be prohibitively costly. So we included a blurb about that when in the discussion of like emergency trail data. Row 27, we talked about rewording a paragraph that was confusing. I don't know why I had that as one of the major things. But for row 28, that was just talking about how the planning department has been working on the preservation of contiguous lands where possible. So just including more information about like the work that's already being done there. In row 31 was about the bike plan that had already been done in 2016, because we had an action item that was saying to just create a new bike plan without mentioning like the updating of the existing plan. So we kind of reshaped that action item. I can zoom to that actually, to provide a lot more information about how the existing plan or the existing work that's been done could be updated. So that's listed here. There was also a discussion about a potential skate park at Perry Hill Park. And there was like 50,000 in ARPA funds that were dedicated to a conceptual design of the skate park. But because no plan was in place to designate the funds by the end of 2024, the funds were moved to another project. So it looks like that didn't go anywhere. So we just kind of left that out of the plan because, but Fiona?
Yes, Sam, I was just curious. So was this, would you speak to recreation about it? The skate park?
Yeah, I already did, yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious because it was one of those things. This is really more of like me showing my ignorance here, but like there was kind of grumblings of it. And at one point, like when I first started in Grafton, it was something that like seemed like it was going to be pursued in earnest. But yeah, this is helpful context because I think just leaving it out because it's always been a little bit confusing. And if ARPA money was the only funding stream for it, and that was reallocated, to me, it indicates that it might not have been as much of a local desire. But with that being said, I mean, if it was something like the timing wasn't right funding wise and there was a priority elsewhere, I guess I just wanted to clarify from you who you spoke to if it was something that might resurface later and should be included in the plan as a long-term goal. And I also will just kind of pose that question to the working group too, because if it's something that we want to do, we should include it in the plan. But I never was able to understand if it was actually if that was actually the
Yeah.
case.
That's a good point. I should probably reach out to them again and like discuss like why that happened in case that's like an issue that could recur. In case that's, you know, like another project like that just gets put aside just because of some maybe like a process issue or something. So I can definitely talk to them about that. Exactly why it was never dedicated. I think from them they just said that they hadn't heard anything from anybody about it in that entire time. But you know, that begs the question of like, well, who should have been talking about it, you know? So
Anne Marie?
Yeah, that's probably me. This has been kind of a project that I've had on the back burner for a long time. There is an appetite in town, but it's amongst a subset of folks who, you know, it's difficult to kind of, you know, get a group together to push things ahead. This site was deemed not appropriate based on feedback from neighbors in terms of where we thought might be a potential site up there at Perry Hill. And then that coupled with not realizing that the ARPA funds had to be delineated by the end of the year and not the fiscal year. So again, I've met with Recreation about this over the years. They have typically, I'm not sure if there's an appetite currently, but you know, been on board with a skate park or replacing. We had a skate park, by the way. So it's more of replacing the skate park that was torn down. And it's just a matter of, you know, the appetite and trying to get folks rallied together to find a site is the biggest barrier. And then I don't know if it was 50,000. It was it could have been between 25 and 50,000, but that would have just scratched the surface. That wasn't certainly going to fund a skate park. It was just kind of the seed money to almost do, you know, plans and a study type thing. So one barrier is the place. And again, for me, I believe that there's still an appetite. And I think it would be worth leaving it in the master plan, but I'm not married to it at this point. I was involved in the first one and I'm happy to facilitate a second one. But it's a bit of a challenge.
Just so you know, Hopkinton just revitalized their skate park, and I think it cost a pretty penny. But if you wanted to reach out to Hopkinton and see how they did it and some of the companies they use, that might help move you along.
Yeah, again, you know, I don't need this as my project, which is part of the issue. It has been, you know, my attempt to help these kids, but it's almost just gaining momentum. So I suppose putting it in a master plan, or at least having some notion to indicate that we had a skate park. It was taken down. There has been an appetite, you know, amongst the teenage kids in our town to have something like that, and it's just a matter of trying to, you know, get some momentum from other folks. But the Perry Hill was deemed a site that wouldn't have been acceptable to the direct abutter.
Okay. Any more on this point, or should I move to the next one? All right, I'll go ahead. So row 36 of the implementation, or the comment matrix, was talking about thinking about options to rely less on vendors. So I mentioned it briefly, how the committee could engage like local performers, artists, and craftsmen to provide different types of programming. I realized that in the doc that I sent you, or that we sent you, I only had like a sentence written about it. So after the fact, I sort of went in and expanded on that a bit. Where is this? Vendors. Yeah, so I just added some information about like, you know, who they could consult to sort of try to connect with different artists or performers in town, like the activities that they could engage in, stuff like that. Row 45 had asked for more information about how to actually go about expanding the Blackstone River Bikeway. So we added a lot of stuff there. It's in here. This sort of just expands upon how like you can get from just like having regional discussions to actually like the steps that you could take to follow through with it. And then there's some more information in this action item just about like other bike path connections in town and just like some of the past work that's been done. Just because I think it was, yeah, Fiona had mentioned that like discussions in the past kind of didn't really get too far. So that's that. Then there was a mention of the fact that Grafton is an MS4 community and different other water quality. Oh, the other thing, like the reason that we're in the open space chapter talking about this now is because this was like, these were different topics that had moved from the NCR chapter into the open space chapter. But yeah, so the discussion of Grafton being an MS4 community, that was moved into the NCR chapter. And that is discussed when we get into other like water quality topics and just the different implications there. And I had already touched on how like the whole issue with regionalizing and stuff like that. And then there was a mention of mini markets in North and South Grafton as opposed to the full farmers market. And I had replied that that could be an option, but I think that it might risk lowering the economic viability of the primary town common market. And, you know, it'll sort of dilute the user base, which could then reduce the atmosphere of it being like a big signature town event. So I guess I'd be interested in hearing thoughts on that, if that's something that we still want to push for or not. Having like the mini markets as opposed to a full farmers market, because I can include it if that is still something that people would want.
Lindsay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you explain a little bit like what you're talking about, like the mini mart?
Yeah, I think it just means like other like smaller scale farmers markets in North and South Grafton to sort of pull in more people from surrounding towns. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, gotcha. Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Colleen?
I like the idea of just keeping it in there. It just helps people, to creatively think of things differently. It might not ever come to fruition, but, maybe think about moving the farmers market, to different sites each year, instead of centralizing it on the common every year. Maybe do it in South Grafton on the even years and, whatever, and then see how it grows from there. But yeah, I like the idea and
sure.
Anne Marie.
I think it's a great idea to leave in there. And as our population grows, perhaps, having multiple markets might be feasible. So I like it.
Yeah,
like keeping it in as an idea.
As an idea, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
sure.
And in fact, you could possibly, and I don't remember off the top of my head how you worded it in here, but mini markets, you might have a general purpose, sort of a general all-encompassing farmers market. Your mini markets might be special purpose ones or particular themes. I mean, it's just speculative at this point, but I think just to reinforce the idea is perhaps worth mentioning, just as something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as someone else said, it may never come to fruition, but it's an idea which kind of resonates with the fact that Grafton does have sort of three centers, or more, depending on how you count them. But at least sort of the predominant division of Grafton into North, Center, and South. At least it's a hint that maybe you could do something comparable to the farmers market, if not moving the whole thing around. You might have some, something, call it a mini market or whatever you want. You might have something that draws the focus at one to North Grafton or to South Grafton, whatever.
Mm.
Lindsay.
Yeah, I think the idea of, moving it from place to place is great. And I guess, whatever all the potential ideas about it are great. So I think it's excellent to add into, a plan, especially since it's, a master plan for, 20 years ahead, or so. So yeah, I like it.
Okay. Oh, is there anything else?
Anything else on this topic?
Not for me. But for the open space chapter, there was one other thing about exploring alternative revenue streams. So I had like a bit at the beginning. Oh, I'm in the NCR chapter. Someone had wanted to have more of a discussion about different alternative revenue structures for conservation efforts. So I included that as an action item. Right here. There it is. Nope. There's so many things to begin with. Explore alternative revenue streams. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Just gave a few different options. Other than that, I think that's it for this chapter. If there's any questions.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, I just want to step back just for a second and just bring this up to Sam and ask the question.
Yep.
The biomapping that they talked about, through the document, has there been any discussion about ways of connecting different areas in terms of, so that either crossing streets or, either bridging certain areas or tunneling certain areas where there could be wildlife that would be able to cross without being hit by cars, certain areas that this might apply to, where there would be this biomap that you've got going on here. I know that as I travel, some states like New Jersey, you go down one of the major highways and you'll see there are bridges with trees on them, where the wildlife can cross the major highway, without getting hit, so it keeps that tract of land contiguous, if you will, so that there's, there's wildlife that can get across or even under. And if you go in some places where they actually have tunnels under where people can go from one neighborhood to another. So for instance, here in North Grafton, where they put the Mass Pike through the middle of the town years ago, they didn't leave any way of creating an ability to continue that neighborhood on. You kind of blocked it all off. So in the end of Carroll Road here, we just have the Mass Pike. Closer to the city, you'd have a tunnel that would lead to the neighborhood next door, where they had put the highway through. So that's just, not saying that that's what they should do. I'm just saying that, has there been any discussion about anything like that or anything brought up in that area?
I don't think we mentioned wildlife crossings specifically, but that's a good point. And I think we could even just have that as its own action item. So I can go back and update that. Yeah. Expand on what that could look like.
Great. Thanks.
Fiona? I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. I lost it. Oh, I got it. Sorry. So quickly, the payment in lieu. Can you just scroll to that? So is it that would be if a private developer was investing and they had an option instead of, I'm pulling this out of if they decided, we need to like maximize the space that we have on this particular plot of land, so we'll opt in for giving the town money in a fund to build, a park. That's kind of how you would envision this playing out.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then what if is this action item something that can be employed or used by the town in a meaningful way outside of just relying on new development? I didn't read all of the specifics, but that's typically what I see.
Sorry, what?
Is whenever there's a payment in lieu, it's usually the responsibility is placed on a developer, and then they fund it. So it's kind of relying always on new development. That's kind of what you're trying to achieve here, or is this a way that we can generate revenue without having to rely on new development coming into town?
I think it would be the option. I mean, as I envisioned it when I had looked into it, was just for like the new development. So,
okay.
And
that's fine. I'm just curious.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Any other
And yeah, that's it for like what I have to show you guys. So.
All right. So any other comments, questions on the open space and recreation chapter draft here? I'll just note that I noticed in a couple of specific numbers that were in there that are inconsistent with the data I have. I won't dwell on that. Let's mention that I will send that to you, Sam, and try to resolve the.
I think we should beat about that because I went back and checked after you sent me that, and I still got the numbers that I got, so we can sort of walk each other through how we arrived there.
Yep. That's something. I'm happy to deal with that with
sure,
directly with you rather than take up the committee's time.
Sure.
And just if nothing else, if no one has anything else, I mean, just I'm wondering how we're going to proceed with sort of the getting this to its final form, in particular proofreading for typos and I think there's a couple of cases I noticed where you need someone with local knowledge to make sure that all the correct names and terms for things are used, and so presumably that's the kind of thing that I would expect to be covered sort of once some sort of a final editing or proofreading pass. And that's I don't think we're ready for that quite yet. I'm just wondering Sarah, what's your plan for getting the finer details nailed down and consistency of terminology and all that sort of thing?
Yeah. In terms of typos and more grammar problems, we are having a copy edit round now from somebody who has no idea about the Grafton master plan, doing more an editorial copy edit.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of local knowledge, I'm not sure if we have a process in place other than this committee helping us with that context, or if a street name is wrong. We can do our best, but if you have somebody certain in mind, that could be helpful. That'd be great at this point to bring that eye in.
Well, yeah, that is something that I will sometimes go off the deep end in my attention to detail like that. So yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I can send you the things that I've observed.
Sure.
But if you want someone from Grafton to sort of look it over as a whole, I can do that, and there may be someone else also who would love to do that on behalf of Grafton, but that is, if Fiona knows, that's the kind of thing that I tend to pay a lot of attention to detail. Sometimes I miss things, but
Sounds like you're perfect for the job.
so however you want to work it, however you want to involve us in making sure that everything in there is talking about Grafton the way Grafton people would understand it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think as soon as we can get a good draft down, it'll be easier for us to do the final plan publication. So we're always taking comments, but for these next 2 weeks, that would be the most helpful for us, so we can get a draft done. And what we talked about with Fiona was mid-March, April. So we are in that last phase of trying to get it as polished as possible and bringing you a full draft of the plan.
Yeah, we would like to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
We've been working toward this now for 1.5 years or so.
Yeah. We have good news. Next month will be implementation, which I know you've been all waiting so patiently for.
Yes, it's a rather important part of it.
Yes.
Yay.
All right. Anything else? Anything else? Any, what do you know now about what we are likely to be seeing at the March meeting?
March we'll check back in on the Hassan-Minisco question for sure. And then the bulk of the meeting will be looking at the implementation narrative and matrix, and hopefully filling in the gaps we're not sure of on that local knowledge of who will be implementing, and making sure we get the context right on that.
Okay. Let me see. What does my agenda say? Public input is an agenda item. Is there any public input? We don't have any attendees on Zoom. If any of us here in the meeting have anything that would qualify as public input, now would be the time. The next agenda item is any other items which may lawfully come before the working group, assuming there are none, unless somebody raises their hand. It's a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Mr. Carroll.
Carol's eye.
Ms. Duckworth.
Aye.
Ms. Fox.
Aye.
Ms. Anne Marie has left. No, Anne Marie's there. Sorry, Ms. Foley.
Fully aye.
Ms. George.
Aye.
Mr. Houle.
Aye.
Mr. Petrie. I think Mr. Petrie has left the room. Mr. Robbins votes aye. Ms. Robbins.
Aye.
Ms. Roy.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.